This session is going to be on data storytelling. Um, Data storytelling is a very, very important skill that I think we all need to get. Data tools today make it very easy for us to access and explore data on its own. However, unless we improve the communication of the insights we are getting from the data, we'll see less value of the work we are doing. So it's important that our insights are understood and that they are compelling such that people will act on it and will see change begin to occur. Okay, so um, just to welcome you all and feel free. It's an online platform, but if you have any questions, please do type them through the chat as the presentation goes on, and then we'll have an opportunity at the end for you to be able to ask questions using the microphone or via chat if you prefer. So I'll welcome again Charles. You remember him from last week. He's going to take us through this important topic of data storytelling.
Hi
Charles,
everyone.
you're welcome.
I'm going to take you guys through the telling stories behind the data that, for previous week, we were mainly concerning about how we can process the data and share it in various platforms in the ways that people can use it and redistribute according to their needs. But in doing so, we also we don't just publish data as data, but sometimes there are people who needs to understand the stories because we collect data for a specific reason, and sometimes that specific reason might highlight some of the issues that might bring up heated discussions and things that can generate further inquiries and people to conduct more research on the subject matter. But in order for that kind of discussions to happen, that shared data has to be put in some sort of a story for people to easily understand that. So that's the purpose of this session today. So we do this better when we are in a classroom, but for this sense, okay, how many have? Okay, let me see the chat. Okay, unfortunately I cannot see everyone. Okay, so we have Sylvia, Ankane, and Larefo. So would anyone care to share any story that would cover these following questions? So why are we doing storytelling then if we have all the data that we have collected and we have formatted in the ways that we see they're up to standards and everything? So storytelling has been there from generations. So since the beginning of time, stories have been around. So you hear things, stories about your ancestors and everything. So that's the way it was the way to communicate things. So but also most of the information that we get is not maybe through reading or through watching TV, but through um, various stories that people put out there. So also the way our brains are made, this is the basic way for us to process and organize the information. As we are human beings, the first thing that we learn to do, even if it is any language, is to speak it first before maybe start writing it or reading it. That's how the brain processes things. Its basic way of doing that. So this is the most important thing, because if we have all this data in form of stories, it's an easier way for our brains to connect to whatever message that is trying to be being communicated by the publisher of that specific data set, or by the publisher of that specific story. So this is why we need storytelling in our cause. So there are a few quotes here to share with you. First, the first one says that humans are not ideally set up to understand logic. So they ideally set up to understand stories. So we just understand stories and we believe them. So that's how we are engineered. So it is in our genes. So also the second one says, if stories were taught in form of, if history were taught in form of stories, it would never be forgotten. So, and also if stories are how we remember. We tend to forget lists and bullets points, but we remember some of the stories. So these are the key quotes I think I should share with you. And they will align with what we are trying to achieve today here. So why is important now telling a story with data, because we can tell a story without data, but at this point we know that why is that important, and also why is storytelling with data at the same time hard. So it is hard because first, no one teaches us how to tell a story with numbers. You know, we know that numbers are just there to be like um, manipulated, like with the board mass. You subtract, you add, you divide. That's it. But it becomes hard for us to tell stories, different stories using the data that we collected, because the basic way to communicate data or numbers is through what we have in the board mass, not using stories. That's one of the challenges of doing that. So also finding a story with so much data can be challenging, because sometimes you might find that there are various insights. When you analyze the data, you see that they have like 3 or 4 major issues that are highlighted by the story. So for you to converge all those different things into a story sometimes can be challenging. And also the tools that we use. So the tools that we use to process the data to the point that we want to share them, they don't know what the data says. So sometimes it's up to us now to understand what is there and try to connect the dots. So the tools we use cannot cannot do that for us. So it's up to us. Excuse me. It's up to us to connect the dots on the various insights that are highlighted by the tools we use to tell the story. And also the process of bringing data visually and add context to, so that data becomes some sort of part of the life we live is somehow scary. So people are like, okay, how can I do this? You know, like, okay, I have the number saying 50. So how can I communicate this? How can I make this easily delivered to the audience? So that's also sometimes challenging, but we can accomplish this, but what we call the golden cycle. So with the golden cycle, what we say is stories help us connect to why. So why is the core value of why we do what we do. So if we have to answer the key question of why, then our stories will tell us how we do that, and what is the product of that why. Because why is there some sort of a motivation. It's like when you are trying to write something, a piece, like maybe say on low agriculture productivity. So your motivation is why are you doing that? Why are you writing on low agriculture productivity? Then you should have, like, let's say I want to advocate for some um, something around or to sensitize something around the government participation. You see, so then there is how can I communicate that to the right audience? Okay, and then the what. So what will be like the call for action after that kind of advocacy or sensitization. So this is how we build the story around. So it's all um, generated by the motivation that we have. So through the motivation of telling a story, that's when we can have the how to write that story or how to tell that story and have that particular product that can connect the two. So we know this is what we do most of the times. So we collect all the information, all the data that we can think of. So we have like a survey of, let's say, 100 questions. But at the end, we are not going to use each and every question when we want to communicate the insights that we have. So this is what we do. So we collect all the data, and later, that's when we think of, okay, maybe I could use this for this particular purpose. But this is what we do from time to time. So the question is, when you are telling stories with data, do we start with question, like the key point, and then look for the data? Or do we start with a data set and then look for insights? So I'll just I'll just leave this for you later on to decide, but I won't talk of what starts and what to begin with and what is the end product, or should we start with data and then insights, or insights then data? But what I'll contribute to that is that when you tell a story using data, first you have to understand the context. So the context under which you want to communicate your story, so that the data that you want to use in that particular environment can fit in. And then you choose the appropriate visual representation. So by saying appropriate visual representation, we know that there are various like graphics and images and graphs that you can use, but not all the graphs should be used every time. So there is sometimes you are allowed to use a certain type of chart or graph according to what you're communicating and according to what is the audience and according to the environment that you're communicating that particular story. So also to focus attention on where you want it. So that the why, you see, that particular why. So that's is like the center point of the entire story. So that's where you should highlight most of the time, so that you don't lose focus of what you're trying to achieve. And also after doing that, then you tell your story. So it doesn't matter where you start, but make sure you cover all these 4 areas. So looking at the context now. So as I said earlier, so you have to know who is your audience. Okay. What kind of relationship do you have with your audience? So if they are students, or they are farmers, or they're just community leaders. So those are the community leaders, but maybe you have a relationship more than just them being community leaders. Maybe, yes, they're community leaders, but they are part of a certain program that you're trying to conduct in their societies. Then maybe in that particular program, you have a certain kind of working relationship with them, so that you know how to tune the communication between you and them. And then what do you need the audience to know? Because there might be a bigger issue to address, but you should also concentrate on the key point that you want to be a takeaway for them. So that's what you need to focus on. And also what is your tone, as I said earlier? So do you intend to motivate, or to show the success of a certain project, or to change a certain policy, so that you want to highlight some key issues that are weak in that particular policy, and how they contribute to the underperformance of a certain program, or things like that. So those are the context under which you can look at your story and trying to communicate it. And then how? So what data is available to make your point? So because we are using to tell a story now with data, then how can I like package all these? Okay, how can I use the data that I have to communicate all this package? So when you're telling a story now, so when you have built your story, and it is right there for communication now, then you're advised to let your passion shine through. So you shouldn't be so shy or whatever. So connect to the story, be part of the story, and do that, and be authentic. So don't like exaggerate things, or undermine some of the things that could ruin the story. And also keep it simple. So don't put it like a too long kind of a story, or too complex, or too vague. So just keep it simple for people to connect to it. And a structured story. So the story should have a certain alignment or certain flow for people to understand, okay, we are heading this way. And also say what you mean to say. So don't contradict people. So um, don't use ambiguous words, so that people sometimes lose track of what you're trying to communicate to them. And also do not be rumble, so that people can understand what you're trying to communicate. So when you're constructing the story, we have to focus on three major parts. So the first part is the beginning. So here is when you introduce the point and build the context on. So this is where you clearly say what is the story about. And then we have the middle part. So this is where you spend most of your effort. So here you talk about what could be, okay, by use of the data, that the evidence that we have. So what could be, and with the goal of convincing. So here it's like you create some sort of what can you call it? Here you is where you speak about most of the objectives of the story, and the issues that could be involved in that particular point that you want to communicate, and what could be the alternatives of the situation if things were done in a different way. So here is where most of the content can be put in, and after doing that, you end your story with a call to action, because you're not just telling a story for you to understand, hey, there's this problem, and hey, we could do this better. But again, at the end, you should call like it's some sort of a recommendation or a conclusion that says, hey, people, now after knowing all this, I argue or I'm calling upon you guys to do A, B, C, D, or for all of us to contribute to A, B, C, D, so that we change something that was introduced earlier, or we propagate, or if it's just advocacy, we propagate this particular issue which we need people to understand in our communities, or something like that. So that's how you can construct your story. So to have the beginning where you introduce the key issue that you want to discuss, and then the middle where is we have most of the content of the story, and the call for action at the end. So we can do that by what we call storyboarding. So this is how you divide your story. So before even writing it, so we have the beginning, the core issues to address, background of the problem, if there is a problem or a certain situation, and pros and cons that are related to that particular issue. And then in the middle, you have the analysis and the findings and everything like the evidence now to whatever issues you are discussing is put there. And then at the end, you have the recommendation, then the conclusion to that particular issue that you want to address. So if you do this, then this will help you to structure your story, because at the end, if you can storyboard your story before starting writing it, then it will help you focus. So to find the focus of so that you don't confuse like some of the findings in the beginning or in the recommendation, because you know your story is, okay, this is where I found something. So you know that this part should go in the middle of the story. So it should be close to the analysis, close to the data that I say I found after doing a certain survey or research, and at the end, storyboarding will help you highlight important points, because once you do that, like this is the preparation of my story, and I should have in the middle I should have the findings. So I'll have this point to talk about, this point talk about, that point talk about. I'll have the analysis, so I'll use this data and that data and that data to do my analysis. In the beginning, I'll have to talk about maybe this is the problem and this is where it started and everything. And the recommendations, okay, at the end, this is what I call people to do. And so that's how you can the storyboarding will help you structure your story and communicate and focus on how you write your particular story. So here is an example for storyboarding. So here you can see in the background the issue is the issue is kids have preconceived bad notions of science. So that's the problem. So that's the background part of it. So you can see how now the storyboarding here builds upon that. So here it says that in the next part here says that show student assignment grades over course and quota to demonstrate the issue. So still it is building upon the preconceived notion of science. And then ideas for overcoming the issue, so including pilot programs. So you can see here this is where now the analysis and the findings are coming in. And then you describe the pilot program's goals and then show before and after survey, okay, feedback to demonstrate success of the program. You can see here, if we try to break this into like beginning, middle, and the end part. You can see the background and the show student assignment grades, and so this is that the part of the background and then the problem, okay. And then when we move to ideas for overcoming and describing the pilot programs and showing the before and after survey feedback, this is the middle part where we have the analysis, we have the data that we collected, we have the some of the findings of the program, and so that if there is any success or there is any failure, we can highlight it there. But at the end, building upon the success or failure of the program, we can have some of the recommendations. So what was the success? Let's expand going forward, or what we need more money or something like that to tackle the problem. So this is how you can build upon the story, but which again builds on the data that we collected through the program that we did in that survey. So that was it. So thank you for listening.